Welcome to this YSL Microsoft Excel tutorial. In this video, we're going to cover the average, median, and mode functions. We'll begin with a quick look at averaging a single range of cells, and then show you how to speed up that process by adding averages using the AutoSum feature. We'll explain how you can average across multiple ranges of cells, and then how to use average in group mode to add averages to multiple worksheets at the same time. We'll also show you how you can average multiple cells across a range of different worksheets quickly and easily, before the end of the video shows you how to use the median function and two different versions of the mode function. So let's get started. To get started, I've created a workbook with several lists of films. I've got one worksheet with 3 separate lists showing the top 10 highest grossing films from the past 3 years. And then I've got that same data separated out onto separate individual worksheets, like so. Finally, I've got one worksheet showing the top 50 highest grossing movies of all time. As usual, if you want to follow along with the video, I'll drop a link in the description below so you can download this same sample data and then follow along with me. For the first part of the video, we're going to take a quick look at the average function, which allows you to calculate the average or the mean of a set of numbers. So it's a fairly straightforward function to use. You may well have encountered it before. I'd like to work out the average runtime for the top 10 highest grossing films for 2021. So I'm going to head down to cell D13, and in there I'm going to type in equals average. If I then open up the set of round brackets, I can point to the list of cells that I want to take the average of. So I'm going to use the mouse to click and drag to select cells D3 down to D12, close the round brackets, and then hit enter to calculate that average. I can do the same thing for the worldwide gross, but maybe rather than using the mouse to select the cells this time, when I type in equals average, when I've opened up the set of round brackets, I can use the keyboard to select it instead. So I'm going to use the up arrow key once to move my selection to cell E12. Then I'm going to hold down Control and Shift, and then tap the up arrow key once. And that will extend my selection up to cell E2. I don't want to include that in my average, so I'm going to hold down the Shift key, tap the down arrow key to bring the selection back down one row, and then if I close the round brackets, I've got the block of cells selected that I want. So then hitting enter gives me the average of that block of cells. Now, using the keyboard shortcut there probably wasn't any quicker than just manually clicking and dragging, but when you've got lists of hundreds or even thousands of rows, those keyboard shortcuts can be really helpful. So that's what the average function does. It's the arithmetic mean of a set of numbers. You could have achieved the exact same results here by adding up all those numbers or summing them and then dividing that by the number of values you've got. So just to quickly demonstrate that, just below the average runtime, if I said equals sum, open some round brackets, cells D3 to D12, close the round brackets, and then divide that by the number of values. There are 10 of them, of course. If I hit enter, I'll get exactly the same result as I've seen using the average function. So typing in the average function is reasonably quick, but we can make things even faster by employing the AutoSum feature. That sounds like a bit of a misleading name, AutoSum. Don't we just use that for summing values? Well, actually, the AutoSum function lets you apply a variety of basic aggregation functions. So what I'm going to do this time is head down to cell D27, and then I'm going to head to the AutoSum button, but rather than just clicking on it, I'm going to hit the drop-down arrow just to the right of it. Then I get a list of choices of basic aggregation functions, and the second one in the list is the one I want, average. So when I click on that, it inserts the average function and then suggests a range of cells for me to take the average of, and it guesses correctly this time, so all I need to do is press enter, and I've got the end result. I can do the exact same thing then in column E in cell E27, head back to the drop-down list next to the AutoSum button, choose average again, it suggests the correct range of cells, and then I can press enter. I can use that same feature to add multiple averages at the same time, so if I head down to the final table on this worksheet and highlight both cells D and E41, when I head back to the AutoSum button, choose the average option from the list, I'll instantly get a result. I don't even get offered to pick which range of cells I want. The only downside of doing it this way is you don't get the same formatting as you saw from the previous individual examples. So I want to maybe manually format that last value using the currency button. I'll go for dollars, English, United States, and then just take away a couple of the decimal places to round the numbers like the previous ones. So far, we've used the average function to take the average of single continuous ranges of cells, but you can also use average to take the average of multiple non-contiguous ranges. So to demonstrate that, we're going to take the overall grand average runtime minutes for all of the runtimes on this worksheet. So I'm going to do that in cell H2. I'm going to use the AutoSum feature to insert the average function. I don't get any suggestions for which cells to average this time. The location of this function isn't near enough to any numbers for Excel to make a suggestion. So all I'm going to do is highlight my first range of runtimes, and that's cells D3 down to D12. Then I'm going to type in a comma, which moves me onto the number 2 parameter of the average function. And you'll see that it then exposes number 3, and this tantalizing little ellipses at the end there indicating that the more numbers I put together, the more options I get. So you can actually add up to 255 different non-contiguous ranges here. Don't worry, we're not going to get anywhere near that number. But we're going to move down then to highlight cells D17 down to D26, and then type in another comma, and then head down to the final set of figures and highlight those as well. So that's D31 down to D40. And at that point, I can just press Enter, return to the top, and get the overall average runtime for all the runtimes on this page. I just wanted to make a quick note about taking averages of averages. So let's work out the overall average worldwide gross in cell H3. I'm going to insert the average function from the AutoSum feature. It now suggests that I want to take the average of that single cell, which isn't quite right. So let's replace that just by selecting cells E3 down to E12. Then I'm going to type in a comma and highlight the next block of cells, the next set of worldwide grosses. Notice I'm not including the overall average that I've already calculated. And then another comma, and then the final set of worldwide gross figures. At that point, if I press Enter and return to the top, I'll see my overall worldwide gross average. Now, it's true to say that I could have done this by taking the average of the averages I've already calculated. Let's just quickly show that we'll get the same result in this example. If I insert the AutoSum average again, and pick this time cell E13, followed by a comma, then cell E27, and another comma, and finally E41. If I hit Enter, return to the top, I've got exactly the same result. Now, the reason I've got exactly the same result is because all 3 separate sets of data contain the same number of data points. There are exactly 10 films, 10 numbers in each of the 3 separate data sets. If I had different numbers of films in each list, then the overall average would not necessarily be the same as the average of averages. So just be careful when you're doing this. Make sure that if you're taking an average of an average, that is what you intended to do. Am I trying to work out the average yearly average worldwide gross, or am I trying to calculate the average of grosses across 3 years? Next, let's take a look at what happens when you've got your data spread across multiple different worksheets. So we've got the same top 10 lists, just stored in 3 separate individual sheets. And I'd still like to be able to calculate the average runtime and the average worldwide gross on each of those. But I don't want to have to repeat that process 3 times. So what we can do if we want to add averages to the same cells across multiple sheets is we can add that in group mode. So I'm going to start by selecting my first top 10 worksheet, top 10 2021. And then to enter group mode, I can hold down the Shift key and then select the worksheet tab at the end of the list that I want to select. So in this case, top 10 2023. Once I've done that, you should be able to see that all 3 sheets in between are highlighted in white. They're tabs. And then if you look at the top of the workbook in the formula bar or in the title bar of the application, you might just about be able to make out the word group there. It's just truncated that because my screen isn't quite wide enough to display it. So now that we're in group mode, whatever you do to the worksheet you're looking at on screen affects all of the other worksheets in the same group. So if I head down to cell D13 and E13, highlight both of those, then go to the AutoSum button and choose Average, it inserts the average into those 2 cells, not just on this worksheet, but on the 2022 and the 2023 worksheet as well. The downside, once again, is that we don't get the formatting for the worldwide gross average, but as we're in group mode, we can quickly apply that formatting to all three worksheets at the same time. If I select cell E13 and then head to the currency formatting button, apply dollars, English, United States, and then remove the places, I've got the same formatting applied to all three sheets at the same time. The single most dangerous thing about working in group mode is forgetting to exit from group mode once you've finished doing things collectively. If I wanted to do something to the 2021 worksheet by itself without affecting everything else in the group, to exit from group mode, the simplest thing to do is just click on any worksheet that isn't currently in the group. So you'll see the word group disappears from the title bar, and only one worksheet tab now is highlighted in white. Next, I'd like to calculate an average across a range of different worksheets. So I've got my top 10 lists spread across these three sheets. I'd still like to be able to calculate the overall total average runtime and the overall average worldwide gross. And I'd like those totals to appear back on the top 10 by year worksheet. So just to start with, I'm going to copy these little headings in cells G2 and G3 and paste them somewhere a little further down column G. And to work out the average runtime for all of the films spread across these three worksheets, we could take the same basic approach we took to calculate the average of everything on the single sheet, use multiple non-contiguous ranges. So if I head into cell H6 and say equals average, and then I can go to the first worksheet, top 10 2021, and highlight that block of cells, follow that with a comma, and then move on to the next sheet, and so on. That's okay as long as you've only got a small number of worksheets to deal with, but the more worksheets you have, the more long-winded and tedious this process becomes. So I'm actually going to abandon this. I'm going to press the escape key to stop adding that formula. Let's begin again. I'm going to say equals average, or attempt to do that at least. There we go. Equals average, open up some round brackets. What I'm going to do this time is head to the first worksheet, top 10 2021, and then highlight the block of cells I want to take the average of. So that's D3 down to D12. Now I know that the setup of all of the other worksheets I want to take the averages of is exactly the same. I want to take the exact same block of cells on 2022 and 2023. So rather than selecting them individually, I can hold down the Shift key and then click on the last worksheet in the range I want to select. So just like going into group mode, it highlights that block of worksheets in this formula. So if we just have a really quick look at the formula bar, we can see it saying average of top 10 2021 to top 10 2023, the values of cells D3 to D12. At this point, all I need to do is close the round brackets and hit enter, and that returns me to the original worksheet, top 10 by year, and I've got that same overall average runtime of everything across those three sheets. I can do exactly the same thing then. Let's just repeat it for the worldwide gross average. If I say equals average, and then select top 10 2021, and the block of cells containing the values I want to take the average of, then hold down the Shift key, click on the last worksheet in the group, close the round brackets and hit enter, and we'll be returned to the original worksheet with our overall average. A final bit of tidying up to apply some formatting, and there we go, the exact same result yet again. Now let's have a look at a couple of other functions associated with the average. To demonstrate these, we're going to head on to the top 50 box office worksheet, and I've set up a little section here on the right hand side to provide some statistics for the runtimes of this list. The average runtime is the first thing there, and we know how to do that by now. We can insert the average function into cell J2. We can just then ignore the suggestion it makes to take the average of that row of data. I'm going to pick cell D2, then hold down Control and Shift and tap the down arrow key to highlight everything down to the end of that list. Then I can press Enter to return to the top and get the overall average for that block of cells. Another value that's associated with the average is called the median, which is the middle value across the range of numbers in that column. So to calculate the median, there's a separate function for that, of course. If we head to cell J3, you won't find the median function in the AutoSum list, so we've got to insert that one manually. I'm going to type it in, equals median. Open up some round brackets, and the setup is basically the same as the average function. We can refer to a single block of numbers or multiple non-contiguous blocks of numbers. For this one, I'm going to click on cell D2 again, hold down Ctrl and Shift and tap the down arrow key, close the round brackets and hit enter. So there we go, we can see the median there is 133. If you're curious about how that number's been calculated, probably the easiest way to see it is if you were to sort this list by the runtime minutes. If I click into any single cell in column D and then head to the Sort and Filter button on the toolbar, I'm going to sort smallest to largest. Now I know that there's exactly 50 rows of data in this list. If I highlight the first 25 of those, we can see we end up at this point here. So the 25th entry is Rogue One: A Star Wars Story with a runtime of 133 minutes. There's an even number of values in this list, so the midpoint is actually in between rows 25 and 26. When you have an even number of values you're taking the median of, you take the sum of the two middle values and then take the average of those. And because they're both the same, of course, the average is 133. So that's how the median is calculated. Next, I'd like to work out the most common, or the mode, of the runtimes. Excel's got a couple of functions for doing that these days. There used to be just one called mode. If I have a quick look in cell J4, if I type in equals mode, you'll be able to make out the old-fashioned mode function with its little warning symbol indicating that it's deprecated. So for new work, what we're going to do is use either MODE.MULT or MODE.SNGL, depending on whether you expect to return a single result or multiple results. We'll go with MODE.SNGL first of all. If I insert that function, then I can simply refer to the list of runtime values, close the round brackets and hit enter, and I'll return the number 130. If I just quickly scroll down the list there and find the value 130, I can see that that one repeats 3 times. Now, the MODE.SNGL function is useful, but it can be a bit misleading. If I just have a quick look at a chart representation of the distribution of these runtimes, I can see that, yep, there is the number 130 with its 3 repeats, but there's also a competitor. If I scroll along a little bit further and find the number 143, that's also got 3 values in the list. Heading back to the worksheet and scrolling down manually, we can find those. There they are. Now we know what to look for. It's fairly easy to spot them. Somewhat less easy to spot with enormous lists of numbers. You don't want to be manually going through that list to see if you're returning a single or multiple mode values. So the MODE.MULT function is handy at this point. If we head to cell J5, and before we do this, making sure we've got enough space below where we're about to enter this formula, because we're going to generate a spilled array. Now, we've covered spilled arrays in previous videos, so just one thing to bear in mind: if you don't have enough space for all the results to spill into, you're going to end up with an error. So I know that that column is completely blank, so I've got more than enough space here. So in cell J5, I'm going to say equals MODE.MULT, and then refer to the same block of cells, D2, down to the end of the list, close the round brackets and hit enter, and now we can see we get these 2 results, the matching tied values 130 and 143. So there you go, there's a quick overview of the average, median and mode functions in Excel. Hope you found that one useful. Thanks very much for watching as always, and we'll see you next time.